everybody. This is Billy, Harnessing Your Wealth. I'm here with a legend himself, G.R. Carter. He is one of the most well-known jockeys, if not overall horsemen, ever to throw a leg over a racehorse. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this show. I've been honored to know him, call him a friend for a long time. And I've had the privilege of interviewing a couple of other Hall of Fame jockeys in Cody Jensen and Kip Diedrichson. And now I've got the one and only number one of all time, G.R. Carter. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Billy. I really appreciate you having on me, and thanks for the kind words.
Absolutely. We got it going here, and we're going to ask you a lot of questions, and I know this is going to be fun for me because I'm always interested in learning more about what made people who they are and just the success stories, all the things behind the scenes. So why don't we start off just with an easy lob question? When you started out, you were young. I'm sure you, like most jockeys, kind of had a passion for the racing industry. How did you get started, and what made you really want to ride racehorses?
I grew up in a ranch and rodeo. I had a ranch and rodeo background, junior rodeo. I was around horses from before I can even remember. But there was a racehorse trainer there in the town of Pawhuska where I grew up. A guy that he had a champion. He primarily run on the Colorado circuit, Raton, Centennial. His name was Gene Herron, and his grandson Chet Herron is one of the best steer ropers in the country now. But anyhow, back from whenever I was probably about 12, and I was involved in gymnastics and wrestling and rodeo. And Gene would tell me every chance he got that you got all the tools to make a great jockey. You're tiny, you're an athlete, you got no fear, you got all that things. He said, and you're not too young to start getting on horses. Well, he started telling me that probably when I was about 12. And finally, the summer after 8th grade, when I was 14, when I got away from gymnastics and was going to go back to junior, I thought, you know what? That I need a job anyhow to kind of support my rodeo habit. So I knew I could start galloping racehorses and get paid. And that's the summer after 8th grade, in which would have been the summer of 82 when I was 14, is when I got on my very first racehorses. And that's a pretty good story. A guy a jockey that rode for Gene Herron had a handful of horses at the racetrack. He was a black jockey. His name was Jerry Daly. Jerry Daly rode the champion that Gene had back in the 70s, a horse named Pacific Dan, which was, I think, champion 3-year-old gelding in like 72 or 73. Well, anyhow, Jerry sends me out on my very first racehorse ever. He doesn't tell me anything. I mean, nothing, other than go backwards around in front of the grandstand, then go a full lap and pull up on the backside. I'm like, okay. So I go out there, and I think it was a little mare, and she was real easy, and she didn't pull much. And and I thought, well, this isn't too bad. And I made it back to the barn. He said, how'd it go? I said, it went good. He said, well, okay, here, take this second one. I go on this second one, and I remember it was a little thoroughbred mare that sure enough pulled on you, just enough to make you work at it. And by the time I made it a lap and a half around her, I was like wore out. My legs were weak and just everything. But I mean, I didn't even know how to cross the reins or anything. And how to get a pull against. I knew nothing. And so I could make say, what about this one? I said, oh, this one here, boy, she wouldn't pull on the bit and all. It about killed my back. He says, okay, well, I wanted you to feel that. And now I'm going to show you. And he showed me how to cross the reins and pull it down their neck where they could pull against you, where you could do all the little things that you end up learning how to cheat one. Well, and I thought, now why in the hell wouldn't he show me that before he sent me out there? What if she would have ran off with me or something? Yeah. But I
you had to learn on the fly, really, truly. You had to learn on your own right there.
Yeah, I did. I had to learn on my own, and I was getting on horses for Jerry Daly, had a handful, and then Gene would haul some in. And literally within a day or two, they had me going away from the gates. And I rode a match race like less than a month after I got on my very first exercise saddle. Wow. At the match track. Yeah.
Was there ever a moment where you thought, I don't know about this? Or were you hooked right from the get
Oh,
go?
the rush of going fast, it was going so much faster than I'd even been on a rope horse or a barrel horse or anything like that. That rush, you could just, I, I experienced that right then as a kid, and it never got old ever. I rode my last races right before I turned 51, and I still felt that rush.
Mm-hmm. Hard
Yeah.
to replace it, isn't it?
Oh, it's impossible to replace it. And I've told a handful of people over the years that I truly wish that a lot of the people that are fans of horse racing could experience that, because you can't hardly describe the rush of one standing there flat footed in the gates and going 50 plus mile an hour in less than 100 yards, and
Right.
just running away from the field knowing you got the race won. It's
Mhm.
it's pretty exciting, pretty special.
Yeah, that's what keeps you going. I mean, the competitiveness in there, and of course, you get with the horse, and it's like it's a bond that you can't really explain when
Yes.
you're in unison with the horse and just getting in that rhythm and feeling the horse. It really has the heart and then the skill uh, to not lose, to just want to win. And I think obviously you've rode hundreds, if not thousands, of horses like that. I'm sure you can recall a number of them that really made a difference for you. What were
Oh,
some of the big breaks that you had early on that really took you from kind of that initial stage guy just getting started, no one really knew, to hey, this kid can ride? What was maybe people or horses?
well, the people who give you the chance to ride, to ride the good horses. And when I rode weekends at the small tracks, some of the non-parimutuel tracks like Eureka, Kansas, and Ada. But I rode my very first official race when I was 16 at Blue Ribbon Downs, and I won it on a mare that Dad had kind of saved for me to be my first mount, and she broke her maiden,
Mm.
which was, looking back, was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, so over the next 2 years, I stayed in school. Most kids, when they end up making money at 16 and they're off at the races, say they're at Rio Doce somewhere, and they got to leave early before the meet's over, go to school. School gets in the way, and most kids never finish school once they start making money riding racehorses. I mean, I can introduce you to a whole slew of guys that I know that my age that never finished school because riding got in the way. But I stayed in school until I graduated. Rode Eureka, Enid, Ada, Salisaw, and I probably won less than 100 races over those. Way less than 100. Probably not even 50 over those next couple of years while I was in high school. But then I moved to Salisaw the week I got out of high school in 1986, and my very first goal. I felt like I set the bar just as high as I could set it, and that goal was the guy that was the king at Salisaw at that time was a guy named Randy Wilson. Randy had been leading rider at Salisaw all through the early 80s and the first few years of parimutuel, and that was my first goal, was to eventually beat Randy for leading rider. And I learned a lot of the things that it takes: hard work, get on a lot of horses, be dedicated and loyal to what you're doing. You get out of it what you put into it, just all of those things. And it was a tough uphill battle, but I finally beat Randy. It took me 3 years before I finally beat him. In 1988, I like telling this story. In 1988, I won 188 races at Salisaw.
Dang.
And got beat for leading rider by Randy Wilson.
Wow.
He beat me by 4 wins,
Oh, wow.
But the next year, 89, it was a different story. I beat him pretty easily. And then so that was like really achieving my first goal. And I look back at, the guys that really, I rode for a lot of different guys. I remember the founder of the racetrack was a guy named Bill Hedge. He's an AQHA Hall of Fame. And he was a friend of my dad's and my granddad. And soon I got out of high school, I rode a lot of horses for them at Salisaw. But the more or less local big time trainer that I started riding for after I'd been there about a year was a guy named Rex Brooks. Rex had been the leading trainer at Salisaw for many years. He ran horses and did good at Ruidosa, and he was kind of one of the legends at Blue Ribbon Downs. And when I started riding for Rex, I was destined to win some big races, and I did. The first Grade 1 I won was the 1988 Heritage Futurity on a mare named Barb's Bounce when I was only 20. And then we come back the next year and won the Futurity again with a horse named Race Car Red, and Barb's Bounce won the Derby. So that weekend was like beyond exciting to win the Heritage Futurity and Derby both as a 21-year-old kid.
Well, that established you right there as a stakes rider. And
yeah, it really did. Rex did a lot for me. And then the other local guy was there at Salisaw was a guy named Don Drake that I won a lot of big races for and did well. And, you talking about, like career moves and people that really kind of help you. One of the smartest decisions I ever made looking back, in 1990, I came and rode at Remington the whole summer, and I was second leading rider. And that was really the first time that got away from Salisaw other than Ada and the small tracks. And Remington was the new big, it was the Taj Mahal. It was the kind of facility that we couldn't believe we had in Oklahoma, and then still today it's a pretty cool place. Well, anyhow, that gave me the confidence coming up to Remington and competing well and being the second leading rider that, I knew that to really better myself and give my chance to a chance to be the best, I needed to go where the best was. So I made the decision at the end of 1990 to go to Los Alamitos and ride the remainder of the winter meet to see if I felt like I could really get in. Well, I went out there with as soon as the meet was over at Salisaw Sunday night. A guy named Roger Smith rode out there with me. I had a little gray 300 ZX sports car, and we drove it from Salisaw, home 1,500 miles west.
And I'll bet you made it in about 6 hours the way you drive.
Yeah, I let him drive some.
Well, anyhow, you're still alive today.
I'll never forget. There's 2 different times I remember getting this feeling. When we pulled up to the track, it was Monday evening. We drove straight through, and I just remember pulling up in there and saying, "Man, that's Los Alamitos. That's where the best guys are at. That's the place that's the place that's going to make me famous. It just the tingle of I hadn't even rode a race yet, but I'm here. And I had my father-in-law Jerry had set me up with an agent, a guy named Terry Morse, which was his hog. He was Danny Cardoza's agent at the time, and they ran 5 days a week back then, Tuesday through Saturday night, and we got there Monday night, and I was on 4 races the next day. I never even been on a race. Tuesday that morning was the first time I ever got on the racetrack, and I was just so excited to be there. I ended up riding, December, January, and I think that winter meet ends in early February, and I ended up winning 28 races. I made it up. I don't know. I was 7th or 8th in the standings and I knew that I was well on my way. I named the legendary guys, Bruce Pilkington, Treasure, Cardoza, Krager, but the guys that were winning the majority of the races, that was the heyday of Kip Dieterson. Kip Dieterson, he kicked ass and took names, and Eddie was right behind him. So I finished that little winter meet, and I went home, moved out of my house, rented it in the spring of '91, and then went back. I went back. The first full meet that I rode in California was the last year that they had the Bay Meadows meet at San Mateo, and that's the very last quarter horse meet they had at Bay Meadows. I'm going to tell you how dominant Kip Dieterson was. I rode there that whole summer, and I enjoyed it so much because I got to see all the sights of San Francisco, when it went to Alcatraz, and rode the fairs once they got started. So I really got to experience San Francisco. But back to the races, I ended up being second leading rider. I beat Eddie by 1 win. I think I won 29 races and he won 28. And I was pretty proud of myself for that. But the only problem was that Kip Dieterson won 72 races.
He just destroyed everybody.
Destroyed. It was like an ass kicking I'd never had before. You know, he had the mount on literally every good horse. I mean, I can sit here and even name some of them, like Kronachik, Ed Grimley, Taking on the Cash, Griswold. I mean, he had them all in every category. Old horse, 870, 2-year-old, 3-year-old. He had them all, and he won. But I knew I was well on my way, and then I started, at Los Alamitos, and Kip and Eddie and Bruce Pilkington. They were kind of the main guys winning the races at the time. Danny was trying to retire. I think he ended up retiring at the end of '92, and
Kenny Hart was still riding then.
Kenny had left New Mexico right about the time that I got out there. He'd left California and was staying in New Mexico. But I rode with Kenny a lot in New Mexico, and the stakes races all over the country for the next few years. But I never was at a meet other than Ruidosa whenever Kenny was older, where he rode the whole meet.
But then Joe Padilla came on.
Yeah, Joe Padilla, 1994.
94, right?
94 was when he showed up, and he was an instant success. I believe he won the AQHA champion jock title in '95, which was really only the second full year of riding at Los Al. Joe, for the '90s, I think Joe won 4 titles in those mid '90s. But we're actually kind of getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, because I wanted to tell you another story about Kip. Kip did so good and rode, and I mean, he was the gold standard. Well, there towards the middle of '92, he was really having a few health problems with his weight. He was hypoglycemic and everything, and he told everyone that he was going to retire at the end of '92. And whenever he was telling everyone, whenever he kind of made that announcement and all, I thought, this next year, '93, if I go back and ride in the spring at Blue Ribbon Downs and then come out and go at it hard at Los Alamitos, that will really give myself a chance to win the AQHA title. Because back in those days, they went strictly off of points. They had a point system, like for a grade 1 race, you wanted out 100 points, and for a $5,000 maiden claiming, you got 10. Or I can't remember exactly, but it was something like that. And it was a cut and try deal on points. And so that's what I did in '93. I rode at Blue Ribbon in the spring, did really well, and then went out, and I ended up being second leading rider at Los Alamitos that year. Eddie beat me, and but with me riding those few that handful of races in the spring, I say a handful, is probably 150 or 200 I rode. That put me over the top, where Eddie didn't catch me on points. So Eddie led both charts that year. He won more races than anybody for the whole year in the nation, and he made more. And he won the All-American that year, '93. That's the year he won the All-American on
Classic Dash. Right?
Classic Dash. So Eddie won both charts, and I beat him for world champion jockey on the point system. So, and that was, Connie Hall had a monster year that year. And, of course, Blaine won the title because he started 4 times more horses than anybody else and dominated Los Al. So I won the title. I remember going to Atlanta, and at the meetings and all, Connie and some of her owners, they made a plea for him to change the way that the champions were picked, because it was a tragedy that Eddie got beat because he won both titles, but led both charts and didn't win the title. And Connie felt like she had way more grade 1 wins than Blaine maybe even that year, and she felt like she would add it. And really, Looking back on it, it was a good thing they changed it the way it is now, where they vote on it, because it brings so much more exposure to it, and people don't. It's not a cut and dry deal who the winner is. But I'm pretty proud of the fact that I won it under the old system, and then won it, quite a few times under the newer system. But
how many times did you win it?
I won it 10 times.
10 times.
I won it 10 times, and Kip won it the second most. He won it 5, and Joe Padilla won it 4. So those are kind of the top.
That's unreal.
I think Cody won it 3 times. So, but they didn't start having that award until the mid '80s. I think like about '84 or something was first year, and that was like Kenny Hart, I think, might have won the very first one, and Bruce, I think, won one in there. Craig or Eddie ended up winning one. I would have felt bad. That I beat Eddie in '93, but he ended up winning it in '96. So I didn't really feel all that bad for him. In '93, it's not my fault that he didn't know how the system worked, and he was taking off.
He's kicking around doing nothing for 3 months.
He's taking off there at the end of the season. Have 2 plugs in the last 2 races to take off and stuff. And I even remember Ramon Figueroa laughing about it, like he don't even realize that he's only 100 points behind you, and then the year ended and I beat him. Yeah.
Well, so many things can happen in horse racing, as we all been there. You go through a little slump, or have a trainer decide, hey, they're taking you off their horses, or heaven forbid you're injured for a while, and they don't wait around for you. They don't postpone. We'll wait to run this horse until you're back healthy again. You can lose out on them. Did that ever happen to you, like a big injury or lose a big barn?
I was probably the most fortunate guy. I had the gymnastics background. I rode for 35 years, and the worst injury I ever had was a broke collarbone, and you can tough that out and go ahead and ride within a week or 2. I broke a little piece off my wrist one time that I missed like one weekend. But really, overall, there's nobody that rode as much as I did and got hurt less. I never missed an extended period of time riding, and I was just so fortunate. And the other question you asked about ever lose a big barn? Oh yeah, I lost the big barn. I'm in the mid '90s. I was Jack Brooks's man. I won the All-American for Jack, and rode horses like Falling in Love Again, Dashing Perfection, Dashing is Easy. He's a Rama man. All horses that made right at $1 million or more. And I rode for Jack for 5 years, and then he ended up deciding that he wanted someone to ride more like First Call for him. I was riding for so many different people, and he was still planning on riding me some, but I went from being his First Call rider, had everything, to then, and that was pretty tough to take. But it took a few years, but eventually Jack came around, and right before he retired, he stuck me back on all of his horses again, and I won the Texas Classic Futurity on Valiant Hero, and the Derby on PYC Paint Your Wagon, and that was a couple of Jack's last starters.
You mentioned there are some horses that are very well known stallions and continue to produce in the industry. What was maybe the most interesting bonus you ever received from an owner for winning a big race?
It's funny you asked that, because I really never even wanted anybody to give me a bonus. I rode for same jock mount, 10% of what the horse made. And, and I had probably a couple of small experiences where somebody gave you some type of bonus, and nothing's free, and whenever they give you that bonus, then the next time that you couldn't ride their horse, they're like, hey man, I gave you that bonus. What are you doing?
Show me.
Yeah. They wanted to feel like you owed them. So I really kind of stayed away from I'm sure I got quite a few, but I can't remember any huge ones, except for the biggest thing anyone ever kind of bonus anyone ever give me, whenever they retired Valiant Hero and syndicated him, Jack Brooks trained him as a 2-year-old, and then he retired, and Mike Joyner trained him as a 3-year-old. And I won the big races I won on him were the Texas Classic and then the Heritage Derby. And at the end of his 3-year-old year, when they syndicated him, and in the syndicate, they gave me and Jack and Mike Joyner all free a lifetime free breeding.
Mm.
Not a full. They more or less give us a half a share apiece. And there was years that I sold that breeding for $15,000-$20,000. Like before I was actually kind of breeding a few mares of my own and stuff. But I still, to this day, they syndicated him there at the end of 2007. So we're talking like, 17 years now. I've had a breeding of that horse all these years, and
wow.
and now I use it. And that's the best thing that any owner's ever done for me. And the owners of that horse were a guy named Terry Bell. They were some of Jack's main owners, Terry Bell and Homer Hill, and Henry Brown from Arizona. Those are the 3 guys that owned him, and I made it a point to thank him every time I saw him. And I'll never forget it. One time when I talked to Terry Bell about it, he told me, he said, that'll help you get in the breeding business one of these days. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I want to be in the breeding business. No, but he was older at the time, and he ended up telling me, he says, the best part about the breeding business is you always have something to look forward to. Those babies that are on the ground, you're just hoping and praying one of them is going to be the superstar. And I realize how right he is now that I've got to raise a few and raise some pretty decent ones. And it's exciting when you see them being born and then bring them up themselves from a little baby to that yearling that you're sending off to a trainer to actually winning something. It makes it's pretty special.
There's a lot of truth in that statement. Say you're never going to die if you've got a yearling on the ground.
Exactly.
You sure are wanting to see how that thing can perform, and everybody gets excited about it.
Oh yeah.
The big question I always get is, I see people at the racetrack, and they remember me as a jockey, but they always ask this: do you miss it? And how do you answer that question? I'm sure you get a lot more than I do.
Oh, I miss it every day. Like that thrill of winning and that rush of leaving there in front and running away from them and knowing I had race one. That never got old. I was so fortunate. I had the perfect ending to my career. It wasn't actually definitely cut and dried going to be the ending, but it ended up being the ending thanks to Mike Joyner, and that's a pretty good story. The last race I ever rode was on December 16th, 2018, the Los Alamitos 2 Million Futurity. And we had a really good Mike Joyner. We had a really great mare that we'd won the Golden State with. Her name is Flash and Roll. And she goes off as the favorite in the finals. And she leaves there just a half a side in front, the first jump, and just runs away from them. This is right before I turned 51. And and that was the greatest rush ever, to think that I knew that I was going to quit that year. I mean, I was, and Mike did too. I said, this is it. I'm going to ride through the end of this year, 18, and I'm done. Well, after she won, we actually had another race we were going to run at Sunland a couple weeks later, the championship at Sunland. We had a horse we won a Derby with at Albuquerque, but he really, was mid-pack kind of horse in that race. Like the big horse was Jesse's First Down. He had probably no chance of beating Jesse's First Down. And before he entered the next week, Joyner called me and he told me, he says, hey, if you want that to be it, if Flash and Roll to be your last mount, he said, I'm good with it. And I said, well, that's what I want. If you give me that option, I'm going to take it. That's what I want to do. So, I mean, how many jocks can say that they went out on the kind of bang where, I won a $2 million horse race, the last race I ever rode. The only other races I ever won that were bigger was probably the couple times I won the All-American. So
Yeah, that's like a guy taking his last swing in the major leagues and hitting a grand slam to win the World
to win the
Series.
World Series. Exactly.
That's amazing.
And
Your career just it got better and better. The stories and all the things you accomplished, but it's quite amazing to just step back and think about all the places you went, all the thousands, tens of thousands of horses that you rode with very few injuries. Because most jockeys will say this: it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You're going to get hurt, and you're going to sometimes it's life changing type of an injury where both of us know personally jocks that never walk off the track again, never walk a period. So what do you attribute that to? Were you just such an athlete from the gymnastics experience that you knew how to hit? Because I'm sure you had horses break down and go down with you.
Yeah, I knew how to hit the ground from the gymnastics without a doubt. But and the other thing that I attributed to was, I've been around horses my whole life, and I could see it going to happen before it happened a lot of times. But when one break down, you're kind of at their mercy, and I would make sure I would jump, and I knew how to hit the ground and roll and stay out in front of them, to stay out in front of the wreck and where they didn't roll over on top of you and things like that. I was so fortunate, and I really attribute the gymnastics and the fact that I was, I've been around horses my whole life, and I could see a lot of it going to happen before it actually did. We talking about the gymnastics. I got to tell one more story on Flash and Roll winning the Los Al 2 Million or last, the last race I rode. I remember I was so excited, and Scott Bryant owned the horse, and as we walk into Winner's Circle, they're all hooping and hollering and then we're taking the picture. Right when we're taking the picture, Scott Bryant horse, GR, you got to do the backflip. It's your last chance. This is like right before I turned 51, and I had tried to not hardly do any backflips the previous couple of years because I was 50 years old man. I didn't need to be taking a chance on breaking an ankle. And I'll never forget, whenever Scott screamed that, and I thought, you're all right. This is my last chance. Well, anyhow, I did the backflip. I lit on my feet, and I had to run backwards, and I barely did stay on my feet. But anything after 50, if you even stay on your feet, it's a 10. And so I scored a 10 the last one I ever did.
10 out of 10. I mean, those of you listening don't know what he's talking about here. Is GR is famous. He had this backflip that he'd do off the horse after they take the wind pitcher, where he'd kind of set himself up in the saddle and then kick himself over backwards and do a flip to get to your dismount. And in thoroughbred riding, there's Frankie Dettori, and he has been very famous for he calls the flying dismount, but I think that's obviously just the girl's way to do it. He jumps out straight up in the air and just lands on his feet. I shouldn't say girl's way, but he doesn't. It's nowhere near as more challenging as doing a backflip, and you're the only guy I've ever seen do that.
Yeah, I'm the only one that I've known ever to do it. But I actually got to meet Frankie a couple 3 years ago, and when I went out to Santa Anita and did helped him with the PDJF telethon, and Frankie was there riding. And I'd had a handful of those thoroughbred guys tell me over the years that they had gave Frankie a hard time about, well, hell, there's a guy in quarter horse racing that does a backflip. And so Frankie was there, and I knew it. So I went in the jock's room to meet him. And whenever I shook him by my hand, I went to him, and he says, I know who you are. You're that backflip guy. So that was pretty cool that Frankie Dettori knew who I was, even if it was just because of the backflip. But Frankie Dettori did know at least who one quarter horse jockey was.
100%. Yeah. It's another feather in your cap to be able to do that. That's amazing. How many buckles do you figure you won? Have you ever counted them up?
No, I've got a bunch.
Yeah. Well, riding in Oklahoma, that's the big thing. Any race you win, and then of course the leading rider and all the other accolades, you probably have trunks full of them.
I've got I've given like 70 they got on display in the Hall of Fame case at Remington Park, and then I've probably got at least another 150. So I probably got 250 area, just kind of just guessing ballpark. But and I won a lot of buckles, junior rodeo and team roping and stuff like that over the years. But it doesn't matter how you win it. That buckle, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You can put it on your belt, and it becomes your ID. You know, that's what one of those Jeff Foxworthy jokes. You might be a redneck if someone asks for ID and you hand them your belt buckle.
What do you have a favorite? Do you wear more than any other?
You know, I've got of course my two All-American belt buckles are my two of my favorite ones, and then I got a buckle that I won at the World Series of Team Roping in 2017. I won the 14 division, which is kind of the pro-am division at Vegas. That was the second year they had that World Series of Team Roping during the NFR, and it is absolutely a stunning gold ruby buckle. I mean, it is so gorgeous to gist, and I'm sure it's the highest price buckle someone paid that I won, and I wear it. It's kind of my dress up buckle. So I actually wear a team roping buckle for dress up, but I do my All American buckles are my two favorites. Yeah.
Were you heading or heeling in that roping?
I was heading for a 17-year-old kid that ended up being a really good rodeo cowboy named Cody Dozier. He was a 17-year-old kid at the time, and we won the 14 division at Vegas.
That's awesome. Going back, and this is a tough question, I know, to answer, but obviously a few horses have to stand out, and I'm sure you've named a couple, but best overall racehorse, just a horse that just you can never forget because of either their disposition or just something that, you know, you had a connection with them, or just like a favorite. Is there one that comes to mind?
You know, I was so fortunate to ride so many. I mean, truly, it's hard to just single one out. But you know, the two horses I rode that were world champions, you know, the years that I rode them was the first one was a horse named Biabono.
Spencer Childers, yep.
Spencer Childers, Dan Francisco trainer, and I won. I think I won 6 or 8 Grade 1 stakes on Biabono. He ended up being the overall world champion as his 3-year-old year, and that whole, you know, and there's several things that the running styles of certain horses is so different than other great rough horses you rode. Like Biabono, he would just kind of break with the pack, or maybe even a half side off the pack, but he had just a crazy strong finish and would just. I think he won the Vessel's Maturity 2 years in a row, and he won the Spencer Childers, the Grade 1 California bred handicap. He won it 3 years in a row. Won the Super Derby, the Winter Derby, the Golden State Futurity. Won all of those races on him. He's such a great horse. But the two heartbreaking deals is. He got beat in the champions 2 different times by a nose. Got beat by a nose in 2004 when he was still the overall world champion. And then he got beat another nose in 2006. You know, that is one of my all time. He ended up, after he retired too, he was the quarter horse representative at the Kentucky Horse Park. You know, for years it was Sergeant Pepper Feature was back there. And then they hadn't had a quarter horse in a few years, and Spencer donated him. I think Spencer had already passed away too, and his family through Dan they donated him, and he lived the rest of his life there at the Kentucky Horse Park representing the American quarter horse. So they, you know, whenever they have the little parade of champions, I don't know if you've ever been there. They from the Champions Barn, they have a little parade where you got to go sometime.
I need to see that. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. You know, like they've had horses like Cigar there, but anyhow, in a barn they have like 6 champions, and it's usually like some big harness horse, quarter horse. Of course, horses like Cigar was there, John Henry, and they show videos and the quarter horse representative with the two that's been there, which was Sergeant Pepper Feature and then Biabono. They were both so gentle and so crowd friendly that they did them last to where the kids could come pet on them and stuff and all. But it's pretty cool. But that horse he had a great later part of life by spending it at the Kentucky Horse Park. Other great horses I rode that really, you know, just really stand out to you, of course, was Stoley's Winner. You know, he retired, won the All-American on him in 2008. he retired as the all-time leading money earner. I think he made 2.2 some million, and it was a few years before someone broke that. I think he's still probably in the top 5 or so all-time leading money earners. But you know, and he was just such a great horse, just big, strong, strapping, good-looking horse that was just really powerful. Leave the gate, just run away from him, and really dominate him. He won several Grade 1 stakes himself. You know, and then other horses that I rode that were had a completely different style of, say, like Biabono, was horses like Flash and Roll. She would just dominate away from the gate and just open up on them. And then another horse I rode had kind of that same run style was a stud named Country Chicks Man. Country Chicks Man here, he was a star at Remington, and I don't know how many big. He won the Oklahoma bred stake, the Sooner State Stakes. He won it 4 years in a row. You know, it's pretty amazing. And
especially now. You know, usually they'll turn them into the stud pendant. You know, right after the 3-year-old year. So
they become too valuable, and that. But the guy that the owner, breeder, trainer was a guy named Sparky Mullins, and he was having so much fun. He would breed him in the spring and then go ahead and run him there.
Hard to find horses like that. You can breed and then go back to the racetrack after that.
We'd breed him run him right at the end of breeding season. You know, get him in light train is crazy. You know, and then I was so fortunate. You know, like I won the All-American on the other horse I won on, Falling in Love Again. Then I rode the stallions that ended up being having really good careers that I rode were like Jess Good Candy. I rode him his first 3 races. I won the Rainbow Derby on Kiss My Hawks, and then I already named PYC Paint Your Wagon, Valiant Hero, and FDD Dynasty. I rode him almost every race he ran except for.
That's right. I was going to say, you know, for Mike Joyner, and that horse was dominant.
Oh yeah, you know, Joyner. You know, for the last 15 years I rode, you know, Mike Joyner, he was really my guy. Whenever I started helping Mike, it was in the fall of 2002. I'd been riding some for him a little bit here and there, but he asked me if I'd come down there and be his main man, and he'd give me first call if I'd come down there. And he said, "Well, you gonna give me first call?" I said, "No, but I'll tell you what I'll do." I said, "I'm gonna come down there, and if you're gonna put me on Kendall Jackson, all your good horses, you got first preference." And what first preference was, you know, Mike always knew that if I got a couple horses in the same race and one of them was his, and they were pretty equal, I would always ride Mike's. You know, I took care of Mike, and he took care of me. And really, by starting that run of riding for Mike in the fall of 2002 is when I went on the run of winning 6 AQHA titles in a row. You know, I'd ride at El Paso in the winter for Mike, and then go right into Remington, right into Ruidosa, and then be at Los Alamitos and Lone Star in the fall. And of course, I rode a lot of really great horses and did a lot of good there for those years. But by riding year round and getting with Mike, it took my career to a second level where I won 6 titles in a row there in the 2000s.
Yeah, that's the key, you know, having a good stable like that and a trainer with tons of good horses. You know, you always have something good to pick.
Yeah, and you end up becoming such good friends with some of those guys. Like Mike's truly he's one of my best friends still today. You know, and a handful of trainers over the years that I rode and did good for that, you know, they become a big part of your life, and they're
absolutely.
You're close to them forever. You're kind of joined at the hip, more or less.
Yeah. Is there any horse that stands out to you that maybe you didn't ride that just seems like a horse that you would have loved to ride, or it is maybe like a?
Oh, no doubt. There's 2. There's 2 that stand out. Like, well, I'm going to go 3, and I'm going to give you the first one since you rode him. Win a lot of cash. I don't know how many races Win a Lot of Cash ran, but I probably rode every single one of them against him. And I never in my life got so sick of chasing a horse as I did Win a Lot of Cash.
I remember you telling me that one day after, I think it was
he was a great horse, you know, and like all of his races from the first part of his career, Sunland, Ruidosa to Remington, and then back to Ruidosa. And then when he was older and running in California, it just seemed like I chased that horse and chased him and chased. I finally beat him a couple of times, but it was towards the end of his career, like on He's a Ramble Man. And the other horses before him that were, in your mind, you watched them run. And I'd won big races, and I was like, man, I'd like to ride a horse like that one of these days. They were running at the same time, and Kip was riding them both, which was Corona Chick and Refrigerator. Those horses both were just they were the stars in their day. Corona Chick won 13 races in a row, and then look at the influence she had on the sport. In the breeding in her offspring. She's the mother of Valiant Hero, Corona Cartel.
Oh, their bloodline,
Corona Cash.
You can never replace
Cash. And Refrigerator, he was truly, just such a cool star. I think he was world champion 2 or 3 years in a row there in the early 90s.
He won the championship is what, 3 times?
I think he won it 4 times.
Yeah. I mean, what a horse.
Yeah. Let's see. He was 2-year-old now. He won it in 92 for the first time. That was Kip's last race he rode when he retired that first time, but Kip he ended up not staying retired, just same as I did one time, I think, but he stayed away about 4 years. I only stayed away like 9 months and went back and rode a couple years, but, Refrigerator was a big star that I ran against, and I was like, boy, I'd like to ride a horse like that one of these days. And
I remember thinking that when I was just becoming, going into the direction of riding, galloping horses, exercising, and he had Refrigerator going. It was 91, I think he won the All-American, and I was just getting started, and I just dreaming. And watched those races and watched him win. And I was praying to God that someday I'd have a horse to ride like that, and fortunately it did.
Oh, you did.
I'm glad I got one. I got one. You got about 50, but I ended up having that experience. That set up, everything. It's changed your life. Obviously,
yes.
You know that, but
yes,
you ride a horse like that, it changes your life.
It's really amazing how much it does change your life. Of course, financially, and your reputation just grows, and then you get that success breeds more success. Mm-hmm. But like Refrigerator, you were saying, he won the All-American in 1990, and he won the champions in 92, 3, 4, and 5. Won a game,
yeah. That's what you call dominating the sport. That horse was unbelievable, and come from basically nowhere.
Yeah,
not a superstar bred horse, just
not at all.
It's quite a story. What do you think as far as current jocks that you watch today? I know you follow the sport because you own horses, but
yeah.
And I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but you obviously had your opinion.
Yeah.
Who are the top 3 best jocks in the quarter horse industry? Right
now, the best 3 jocks, without a doubt, are Brian Canonosa, Francisco Calderon, and I really like a couple of different young kids, like that Edwin Escobedo. Looks like he's got a bright future in hunting him. But really, overall, Calderon and Canonosa, and James Flores. James Flores won a couple AQHA titles, and he's won the All-American a couple of times. But probably those 3 guys, James Flores, Calderon, and Canonosa, they're living the life that they're living the life that I lived for years. They're riding, they get mounts in all the big races everywhere they're at.
High demand. That's when you're something special, when you don't even qualify and they call you to come and ride. Fly somewhere, pay your travel, and go ride somewhere, and all over the place.
Oh yeah,
a lot of trips I'm sure you had where you were red-eyeing to get there, jump on a plane right afterward, flying a lot of private planes, right?
You have no idea. You name it. Someone asked me here just recently about how did I get to Ruidoso, and I laughed. I says, "What do you mean? How did I get to Ruidoso? You name it, I got there. From
Mule.
hitchhiking to private planes to the 4 6s ranch plane and I can tell you how far it is from every airport. Exactly, from Roswell, El Paso, the Ruidoso Airport, or Albuquerque. I can tell. I mean, I did it all.
And sometimes cutting it real close, right?
Cutting it very close.
Your watch, like, oh shit, I'm gonna miss this. I'm gonna miss this race.
And I rode, especially when I got a little older and was really kind of, I guess you'd say, in high demand. I rode a lot at Los. I rode a lot of most of the big stakes at Los Alamitos. I'd fly, turn, ride. Of course, it runs at night. So to be able to make it from the West Coast back this way, you couldn't hardly make it in time to ride the first race. Like if you took the 5:30 a.m. flight out of LAX and went and you'd go through Dallas, where you'd get up here like at 1:30 and the races started at 1. So your only option was the red eye, like you said. It used to leave. There's several red eyes, ones from LA to Houston or Dallas. And I would really like to know how many times I took the red eye. And I took it many times to be able to ride the first race, even at Ruidoso. If you wasn't flying private, I'd have to take the red eye like to Houston and then back to El Paso and then make it up there. And I'd still barely make it up there in time to ride the first race. I
don't know how we did it back in those days. There wasn't any Google Maps or anything like that. You didn't know where you were going half the time. You're just trying to get there.
And all the great riders, I remember even traveling with you a few times, flying for here and there to go ride. But all the other riders of my generation, I've got travel stories with all of them, from Joe Badilla to Cody Jensen to Jackie Martin, and all those guys. I traveled so much, and we'd be traveling the same path, so we'd usually try to travel together, especially if we had to rent a private plane or things like that. And
that's the cool thing, is you compete so hard against each other, and then your best friends are out when you walk out of that jocks room. Travel together and all kind of cheering for one another. But man, you're competitive when you get in that jocks room. Did you ever get in any fist fights with other riders?
Yeah.
People don't know what this is like, but that is a totally different world when you get into that jocks room and the adrenaline's going, and the competition and the juices are going, and then you feel like somebody cut you off, or they did something that cost you a placing, or maybe potentially cost you a near miss accident. I was in a few in my career, a few altercations.
Oh, yeah. You got to defend your ground, or you're going to get a reputation of being weak. And then,
you just start hitting you in the nose, and then you're just pulling your horse up right out of the gate.
Whenever I first moved to Sallisaw, right the week I graduated from high school, in February of that year, I won a state title in wrestling in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a pretty tough wrestling state, and I won the Class A state title, 108 pounds for Pawhuska High School. I'd pull weight a little bit to do 108, but so then after I moved to Sallisaw, right after I got out of high school, and had quite a bit of success pretty quickly, a lot of those older guys, ones that were just kind of the mediocre guys, they labeled me as a cocky, arrogant, young punk kid, and they would challenge me, and I wasn't scared of any of them. I used to love fighting in the jocks room, because there's not anybody in there any bigger than you are. You all are the same size. You're on the same level. And I had that wrestling background. I'd take them to the ground and
that's awesome. Get them down, and then you just
right? Pummel them. Yeah,
that's funny.
But
I love that.
I remember having quite a few fights the first 3 or 4 years after I got out of high school, and then I went through a pretty good hiatus where I tried to be above that, but then I slipped. I think the very last year that I rode, some kid smarted off to me as he handed me the phone to talk to the stewards at the scale house at Remington, and he smarted off to me, and I slapped him with the phone and sliced his cheek open. That was the last year I rode. I just still
right in front of the stewards and everything.
Right in front of the whole crowd, the stewards, clerk of scales, everybody.
What did you get fined a little for that?
Oh yeah, I'm sure. It seemed like I got fined 500 if I remember right. Yeah.
Oh wow, not too bad for a guy like you.
Yeah.
What's the life as a jockey? You explain to the listeners. Everybody kind of sees the glory, and you're out there
Yes.
flying your silks, and you see the win pictures and all the accolades in the magazines, the trophies and the buckles. But talk about the grind and the life of a jockey. Just the requirements, not only the physical part and the dieting, weight loss, to just the workload and being in that jock's room for hours on end.
All of those things that you named right there they're really mentally challenging. It tests your strength mentally. But what people don't see is, and I was known for that guy, that I was known as a worker. I'd get on 12 to 15 horses every single morning, 6 days a week. Ruidoso, Remington, where I was at. I'd be there when the track opened at Los Alamitos back in the early 90s, when it opened at 6, and I'd be there when it closed at 10 or 10:30, whatever it was. They had a break in there. I think they might have closed at 10:30. But I'd get on a lot of horses in the morning. Most people don't, especially the average gambler or race fan, they don't see all that morning work. But I would like to know how many horses I got on in 35 years of race riding in the mornings. I rode 30-some thousand actual charted races, but I probably
10 times more than that as far as horses you actually just sat on.
Got on in the mornings. Yeah. It's a business like anything else. You get out of it what you put into it. And I knew that success from the sports that I was in as a kid, gymnastics, wrestling, rodeo. And so I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be dedicated to it. And I'm going to be the best I can be. I never drank much at all. And of course I stayed away from the drugs and all of that other stuff that I saw hurt so many of the colleagues that I was riding against. You see them struggle with dependency deals like that and all. I stayed away from that. And the way I was able to stay away from all that was by working my butt off. I dedicated myself to it. I treated it like a job, and I'm proud of the way that I did do it. It's looking back, I wouldn't change anything. I really was. That's what I was for 35 years. I was a jockey dedicated to quarter horse racing primarily. I rode over 25,000 quarter horse races, more than anybody in history. And then if you add paint saps and thoroughbreds on top of that, it gets me up 32,000 area in actual mounts.
Yeah. Oh, unbelievable. With the stress and workload, did you ever have a problem with your weight? I mean, most jockeys do have some sort of protocol to keep their weight in check. And heck, back, when I was riding, which now seemed like a lifetime ago, but weight assignments were a lot lower than they are now, so you had to actually, here in Utah and Wyoming and places where I started, Idaho, you were riding a set of trials and quarter horse trials. It was 118 pounds.
Yeah.
So, you better get on the scale at 114 if you're going to make the weight. And now, they're all the way up to 124, 126.
128, some of Los Alamitos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then some of these guys are still 10 pounds over when they get on the racetrack. But what did you have to do to keep your weight in check?
I was pretty fortunate. Like when I first got out of high school, I was light. I could probably tack 16, when in my first few years at Salisaw. But after I got a few years in, I never really had to watch my weight just real hard, because I got on so many horses in the morning and rode so many races during the week. Like one year at Salisaw, I rode like 1,700 races at Salisaw in one year. Nowadays, if anybody rides 700-800, they rode a tremendous number of races. But the number,
The weight.
the weight
down by working.
Yeah, that's how I kept my weight down, by working. That's exactly, you nailed it right there. I didn't I was always right there. I didn't have to carry much lead, but I wasn't ever real heavy. I was dedicated to it, so I knew that to be able to tack 120, I needed to weigh 116 or 117. That's what I'd go in at every day. Mm-hmm. And once you get your weight down, and as long as you stay that busy, you don't really seem to put much on. But
not like you're dying for food or
and whenever you're working that hard, you have to eat. You have to eat for your body to have the energy to be able to rock on. But whenever I tried to quit riding that first time in 15, and when I came back and rode those couple 3 years in 17 and 18, of course I was late 40s, early 50, and I had to watch my weight pretty good then. I got a full dose of sure enough having to diet, and of course I wasn't getting on near as many horses as I did 20 years earlier. So I had to watch what I ate pretty good those couple years when I came back. But
I spent some time, riding thoroughbreds. I tried to make a go of it out there in California with some people that I had connections with, and I saw a whole new dimension of what some of those riders are going through. Because the assignments on thoroughbreds are quite a bit less than the quarter horses, and I tell everybody that people don't believe me, but jockeys the only athletes in the world where there's an actual puking or flipping bowl in the bathroom. You just walk in, and you guys will just walk in and bend over and throw up. So a lot of the riders are bulimic to keep their weight down, something that I could never force myself to do. It wasn't for me. So I was like you. I just try to work myself to a point where the weight wasn't a factor. But it is a challenge for a lot of guys.
Yeah.
Having to keep that down.
It's a crazy mental challenge for a lot of guys that they end up having, mental health issues because of it. You talking about the thoroughbred deal, that's remind me of another crossroads in my career. When I first got out of high school, I rode everything at Blue Ribbon Downs in the late 80s that they led up there. Paints, apps, thoroughbreds, quarter horses. I think I might have even rode a mule and an Arabian or something, along the way.
Arabian, yeah.
But I rode everything, and I did better with the quarter horses than anything, but I did really good with the thoroughbreds too. There was years that I won 70 or 80 thoroughbred races at Salisaw, and I think Cliff Berry left Salisaw to come to Remington when they opened, and I think I was even the leading thoroughbred rider there in like 1990, the last full year that I rode at Salisaw. But so whenever I decided in the summer of 90, after I come up to Remington and I thought to myself, I need to go somewhere. I need to make a decision where to go to give myself a chance to better my career. I wanted to eventually, make it to Ruidoso with a chance to win the All-American, of course. And I knew that if I went to Los Alamitos, that would really help. But the deciding factor was the story you just told. The scale weights on the thoroughbreds is consistently about 5 pounds lighter. At the time in 1990, I was tacking 120 pretty comfortably without having to diet a whole lot, by just working hard. But really, if I was going to go ride thoroughbreds, say at East Coast, West Coast, or Kentucky, I would really need to show up tacking about 115 or 116 at the most. Mm-hmm. And that would make me have to weigh, 110 or 11, 12 strip. And that was one of the deciding factors of why I decided that I'm going to go to Los Alamitos. I'm going to throw my heart and soul into the quarter horse game and see where it takes me. And one of those deciding factors was that the scale weights was just a little bit more, because I knew that, if I'm going to do it for many, many years, you see a lot of those guys that end up having health problems because they dieted so hard for so many years. Their bones become brittle. It seems like when they get old, they can't hit the ground without breaking something and all. And I feel like I was either smart or lucky that I chose that path, and that's one thing that helped keep me from getting hurt, and that I didn't have to fight my weight that bad. But I probably would have if I would have went and rode thoroughbreds.
Mm-hmm. Well, it worked out pretty well, I'd say, GR.
Yeah.
The path that you chose and the people that you got connected with, and you're still involved. Some riders end their careers on the racetrack. They're forced to stay in it in some capacity, where it's a pretty big demotion, unfortunately, for them, where they're, working in the jocks room, taking care of riders. Some of them stay in the sport as trainers, or become officials like stewards. You had the freedom and the flexibility because you were smart financially. You got into some businesses and were able to continue earning a living and doing things that you love to do without being hamstrung or tied in to doing something you really didn't want to do.
Right.
So I commend you for that. Wonderful career, hell of a story. And I think you're going to hold the bar high for a long, long time. These guys can just hopefully listen to this and understand what it takes to get to that level.
I became the all-time leading money earner in quarter horse racing in 2009. When I passed Jackie was in 2009. And we're talking that's 16 years ago, and there's still nobody's really got close. But as quarter horse racing gets better, purses will grow, things like that. There'll be someone come along. It might be Canonosa or Calderon or James Ford's, any of those guys that are they're barely or not quite 30. I think Calderon's just over 30 and Canonosa's only mid-20s. They'll have a chance of eventually getting that earnings record. And you know what? And that's great, because that shows that the sport is going in the right direction and growing.
Mm-hmm.
But the wins record, I won just over 4,000 quarter horse races. The kids nowadays don't have the racing opportunities to ride the numbers of races that I did back early in my career, or even that you did, during your run as a jockey there in the 90s. There's not the numbers of races. The race meets aren't as long. The race meets don't run as many days a week as they used to. And they'll and I was dedicated to it for 35 years and with those bigger numbers. So it'll be really hard for someone to ever get the wins record.
I truly believe your wins record is pretty secure. So amazing accomplishment. You go down in the all-time record books, and I'm glad that you're still involved. We serve on some boards together, and involved in now giving back, hopefully keeping this sport moving forward. So I want to thank you again for joining us today, and hope you guys out listening out there enjoyed this show and enjoyed listening to one of the all-time best jockeys to ever sit in a race saddle, GR Carter. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. For more information about today's show, please check out the show notes. Visit our website at www.petersonws.com or give us a call at 801-475-4002. Peterson Wealth Services is a registered investment advisor. This is a paid-for advertisement. Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up-to-date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions and answers to questions do not involve the rendering of a personalized investment advice, but are limited to the dissemination of general information. A professional advisor should be consulted before implementing any of the options presented. Peterson Wealth Services.